Hello, I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. When the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia had convened, Ben Franklin is purported to have been approached by a woman who said, "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us? A republic or a monarchy?" Ben Franklin is purported to have replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." We saw that in action tonight in the Plano City Council as we took up a very important matter. An emergency meeting was called tonight to discuss an ordinance to require businesses to require employees and customers to wear masks, or else be penalized $500 a day if they did not have a policy which they enforce, which required mask wearing. Now, the question tonight should not have been whether masks help. Overwhelmingly, they do. Sometimes they don't. We've seen deaths from hypoxia from people wearing masks while exercising. Obviously, not everybody gets how to properly go about it, but on the whole, they help a lot more than they hurt. However, this is a fundamental question of what is the role of government. The chat on Zoom was contentious beyond belief. There were people spamming. They just copy and pasted their thought and they just hit enter over and over again. There were people decrying that we were sacrificing our citizens if we didn't pass such an ordinance. And I said this on the virtual dais because we were on Zoom. I want everybody to understand, think back to mid-March, early March. This was declared a pandemic on March 11th. Remember the terms slow the spread, flatten the curve? The only ostensible reason for shutting anything down in the first place was to avoid overwhelming our hospital systems. We never came close. In Plano or in Collin County, our citizens and our businesses, to the extent to which they were allowed, stepped up. Many of them got very creative. They're not going to stay in business if they don't meet the concerns of their customers. And we did a stellar job. Even now, when we saw an enormous spike in cases over the past month, 4.5%, that's 4.5% of our hospital capacity in Collin County is filled with COVID cases. That's after the spike from the protests. Fortunately, we didn't have any riots in Collin County. But you get thousands of people jammed shoulder to shoulder, many without masks, you're going to get an uptick in cases. And yet, since the beginning in Collin County, only 1.4% of all confirmed cases have resulted in death. Now that's horrible. I don't want anybody to die from this. But compared to other places, that's a phenomenal outcome. Much better than the alternative. And don't be mistaken, the alternative is not zero. If you think we can achieve zero hospitalizations and zero deaths by requiring masks or shutting down businesses or taking any number of measures, as I said in the meeting, that is the height of hubris. If we think we can actually achieve that just by mandate, just by fiat, other people have pointed out rightly that the virus doesn't care about politics. It doesn't care about a number of factors. It just goes where it spreads. We cannot stop that. We were never going to stop that. What we need to do is protect the most vulnerable, the elderly and those with comorbidities, serious underlying conditions. We need to protect them as much as we are able. We need to develop herd immunity. Now, apparently there's a lot of misunderstanding about what this means. It means that if you've had it and you've developed antibodies, even if you get reinfected later, chances are you're not going to be nearly as bad off, and hence you are not going to be as communicable. You are not going to be a host that is going to transmit the virus as readily as when you first contract it and it's novel, as it is for most people right now. We're not going to get a vaccine anytime soon. And by soon, I mean within the next 6 to 9 months. Not a reliable vaccine. Just because of the process. If you think there's risk in rushing through a test, then just wait till you try rushing through a vaccine that could have potentially catastrophic consequences without proper testing. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a true policy decision. I saw somebody decrying that I was even quoting statistics at all. Well, if you're going to make policy decisions and you don't use logic and reason and actual numbers and statistics and facts, and if you just go with blind feelings, you're doing it wrong and you're going to cause a lot of damage. So what kind of damage are we talking about? Yes, regrettably, people are dying. People are getting ill. People are suffering the effects even when they don't die. So what is our job? Is our job to make sure people don't get hospitalized, make sure people don't die, make sure people don't get sick? Because we tried that by shutting down the global economy, and it was disastrous. Our unemployment almost reached the peak unemployment of the Great Depression, the Great Depression. And as I said in the meeting, the pivotal role of government is to secure our rights and our liberties, not to secure our health. We should absolutely promote good health practices. The CDC has made recommendations. I see how little they're understood because I still see people driving around in their car with the windows up wearing masks all by themselves. Okay, COVID-19 is not floating through the air like smog. It's passed primarily by droplets, not small water droplets, but droplets, which are microscopic. Masks absolutely help prevent the spread of droplets. But is it our job to mandate? Is it government's job to mandate that people wear masks in order to slow what we cannot stop? We'll get there eventually. And when this has run its course through the human race, then it probably won't be any worse than the flu. But anybody who thinks it's no worse than the flu right now is obviously not looking at the body count. We have reached 120,000 deaths just in the United States. The average number of deaths in flu season is about 30,000. It reached 100,000 during the Hong Kong flu pandemic in the 60s. So this is now the worst pandemic since the Spanish flu of 1918. So we absolutely need to take it seriously. But to what extent are we willing to go? We shut down the businesses already. Should we have done that? Probably not. The only legitimate reason to do so would be to avoid overwhelming the hospital system so that the people who needed critical care could get critical care. And we never came close. So we can't justify shutting things down. If we forced people to wear masks, yeah, it would probably slow the spread a little bit, but that's really delaying the inevitable. The purpose of herd immunity is so that there are fewer ready hosts for the virus to jump between. We need to get there. Are we going to wreck our economy until that happens? It's not a centuries-long process. It's probably a couple of year-long process, maybe less. I got a checkup on Sweden. They did that. They did not shut down their economy. They are trying to achieve herd immunity. They're not going to have a catastrophic second wave of this. We are having the second wave right now. Why? Because we started to open up, and then we had hundreds of thousands of people across America in protests. It was always going to happen, unless we stay shut in for the rest of our lives. Which brings us right back to, what is the purpose of government? And I contend that if the purpose of government is to keep people from getting sick or keep people from getting hurt or keep people from dying, in other words, to protect us, irrespective of liberties, then I look forward to the champions of mask mandates with penalties, of bringing forward ordinances and legislation to require solid steel cars and school zone speed limits across every piece of pavement in the city or the state. Because 40,000 people die every year in auto accidents, entirely preventable if you drive 20 miles an hour. And you drive a big hunk of steel. May get a little banged up, but probably nobody's going to die. We're not championing that. Because life is inherently risky, and life does ultimately end in death. It's unavoidable. So what's the end game? Is it to survive longer? Is it to keep more people alive? Or is it to allow more people to live In the movie Braveheart, Mel Gibson, playing William Wallace, said, "Every man dies. Not every man really lives." Applies equally to women, of course. We have experienced unprecedented and historic challenges in the past few months. I don't know that it was worth it even a little bit. The shutdowns. What are we going to do to our lives in the name of survival, which is only living on borrowed time anyway? There was a theory that the numbers that went through New York City, which was the epicenter in North America, some 30,000 dead in New York City alone from COVID-19. The theory is that because New York is so dense, it just ripped through the city and knocked out everybody it was going to knock out, and now probably it's not going to suffer as bad in the future. Everybody who headed this off to begin with and shut everything down, and nobody went out for months, just delayed the inevitable. Now that people are going out, it is starting to spread. So our job as government in a republic is to make sure we are promoting the rights of people. And yes, the right to life is one of those rights, but it does not come at the exclusion or expense of our other rights. If we are approaching, if our trajectory is such that our hospital systems are threatened, then we should do something. Absent that, I believe it's hypocritical to say we should mandate masks, but not flu vaccines, or flu shots, I should say. And what I said in the meeting was, are we to mandate flu shots? Because if you take a flu shot, you're less likely to come down with the flu, at least for the strains that you get the flu shot for, and therefore you're less likely to spread it on to some of the 30,000 people who die on average every year from the flu. So should we mandate that? Should we mandate taking your vitamins? Because it enhances your immune system to make you less likely to get the flu and spread it on to the 30,000 people who would die every year. Everybody who takes up the cry of if it saves just one life doesn't actually mean it. I mean, I wish every life could be saved, but every single life ends the same way. Sooner or late. We can't stop it. What we can do is try to promote the best lives possible for our citizens and make sure that something like smallpox, which was mentioned in the meeting, smallpox had a 30% mortality rate. And to my knowledge, there were no asymptomatic cases. It was pretty visible. A pox is visible, any kind of pox, chicken pox or smallpox. So you knew who had it, and 30% of them died. That is something that merits immediate action. I don't want anybody to die from COVID. But we have now hit, I think, 2 million cases in the world, confirmed cases. That's not to mention the people who never got tested or were asymptomatic and hence never got tested. Life happens, y'all. Sometimes it's ugly. It's a natural function for human beings, I think, and I'm grateful for it, to want to help each other. The best way we can help one another in the long term is by understanding what we can and cannot control, encouraging good practices. It was also mentioned by another councilman in the meeting that Governor Abbott said, wear a mask. Dr. Fauci said, wear a mask. Vice President Pence said, wear a mask. Correct, they all did. And none of them mandated it. I suggest we do the same. We urge people to take the appropriate CDC recommended precautions. We educate them on how to do it properly. There's a ton of misinformation floating out there. But we don't mandate it. We don't use government at any level, local, state, federal, don't even get me started on the UN, to accomplish what should be accomplished by personal responsibility and what can't be accomplished absolutely in any case. There's got to be a verifiable purpose And if your purpose is saving just one life, you've got to change your tune on hundreds of other aspects of life, which entail risk. In the end tonight, we voted on an amendment to the ordinance. The initial ordinance proposed was to require face masks, or rather to require businesses to require face masks, because Governor Abbott's executive order, GA 28, I believe, said that individuals shall not be required to wear face masks or suffer penalties for it. However, a week ago, a handful of mayors, including ours in Plano, asked the governor to be allowed to force businesses to force people to wear masks. And the governor, confusingly, said, that's been allowed all along. And so they started. And then the governor shut down bars and, again confusingly, tube venues, like inner tube venues, rafting and tube venues. And then a couple days later, California Governor Gavin Newsom followed suit and shut down bars. And I submit to you that if Gavin Newsom is following your lead, it's time for a hard look in the mirror. As long as we are not threatened to have our hospital systems overwhelmed and hence care denied to the people who need it, who are in the worst condition from this pandemic, then we should trust the people of Texas and the people of America and ultimately the people of Earth to come up with the solutions that will mitigate this. I've spoken with a number of business owners here in Plano who have done just that. They have come up with creative ways to continue to do business to the extent which they were allowed by law and meet the needs and the concerns of their customers. This is what made America great, the ingenuity of individuals and businesses trying to meet market needs. So tonight, an amendment was offered to strike the penalty and the enforcement clauses and change it from a requirement to a recommendation. I'm happy to say that amendment passed 5-3. And that is what will be put into effect in the city of Plano. We are absolutely encouraging individuals and businesses to wear face coverings when it's appropriate, per CDC guidelines. Nobody will be penalized for not doing so. A lot of people tuned in tonight. We reached the 500 person Zoom limit in the early to mid-afternoon. And the rest of the people just had to watch on Plano TV. This is what a republic looks like. This is what citizen engagement looks like. I wish it were more amicable. I wish there weren't as much spamming or demagoguery, but get engaged. If we weren't engaged, if you weren't engaged, what you spoke to me about tonight wouldn't have happened. We would have passed an ordinance just like Clay Jenkins did in Dallas County. And we would start fining businesses for not requiring masks. All sorts of stuff like this goes on at the local, county, state, and federal level, all across the country. Most of the time, nobody's paying attention. Start paying attention if you're not already. You can do that in part by watching my videos. Whatever you're watching, whatever your opinion, whatever your stance, whatever your position, whatever you're championing, I appreciate your engagement. I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. Good night. God bless you.